We've made it down to the foot. Hey. And we are going to see some similarities with the hand, but some obvious differences. Instead of carpals, these are all called tarsal bones. And instead of metacarpals, these are called metatarsals. But they end up with phalanges, so that's what we've seen with the hand. And so we can take a look at these. These are easy bones. And just like the hand, the equivalent of the thumb, the big toe, only has 2 phalanges. So you've got a more proximal one and a more distal one. But the rest of them have 3. And so you've got a proximal, middle, and distal for all of the rest of them. And then the numbering goes kind of the way that you would expect, in that this is 1. So the big toe is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's the numbering for all of these metatarsal bones. And then we have all of these tarsal bones. And it's not as complicated in the hand as the hand is. Well, just 1 fewer bone. So while the carpals are 8, there's 7 of these. But I think they're easier to learn. And I'll start with the real big, obvious ones. This largest of the tarsal bones, it's like your heel bone. This is called the calcaneum or the calcaneus. And then this other large one, and you can kind of see from its surface that it does articulate with the tibia and a little bit of the fibula, but the malleolus, the medial and lateral malleolus will wrap around this. I'll show this in another video. So that's called the talus. So calcaneum, talus. And then I'll talk about this bone here, this one that's touching up against the calcaneum. This one's called the cuboid. This one that's touching up against the talus is called scaphoid. It also can get called navicular, so it has 2 names. You know, the one that I actually have on the list is navicular, so you can use that. Then there's these 3 bones in a row, and they all get called cuneiforms. And as you might suspect, they get different names. This one that articulates with the big toe is called the medial cuneiform. This one's intermediate, and this one is lateral. Now, I guess one thing that might be confused about this being the lateral cuneiform is that you would expect it to be way out, even more lateral, to get the name lateral. But remember, this is the cuboid. So among the cuneiforms, this is the lateral one. So again, medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiforms. All right, so now that I've introduced you to these bones of the foot, all these tarsal bones, let me talk about some of their function. And well, you know, I'll start with the top. So the most superior bone, and the one that I had started off with before, the talus. So the talus obviously has this nice rounded superior portion to it. And when I told you about the medial and the lateral malleolus, they kind of wrap around this talus. The weight of the body comes down on the talus, but then it transfers to the calcaneum or calcaneus. The talus bone doesn't have any muscles that insert or originate on it, but they do have ligaments that attach to it to help support this foot. And whenever you have that, that means that that bone will be less vascularized, which means then if there were to be a fracture of this bone, it will be harder for repair to occur. With the calcaneus, that is a place where the Achilles tendon comes from, and the Achilles tendon is coming from the gastrocnemius. So that's a main muscle that attaches there. And then in taking a look at some of these smaller tarsal bones, remember we have the navicular. That gets its name because it's kind of boat-shaped. Think navy, boats, navicular. The cuboid. These are fairly large, but then you have these smaller cuneiforms. One thing to think about with these cuneiforms is that they help produce the arch of the foot, especially what they call the transverse arch. And I think you can see that pretty nicely by taking a look at what the superior shape of these cuneiforms look like. Remember, this is the medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiforms. So here they are on the superior, and here they are inferiorly. And especially this intermediate cuneiform, I'm going to show it to you this way too, that you can see that there's a wedge shape to it. It's much wider superiorly than it is inferiorly. And the same thing goes to the other cuneiforms. And just that shape means that it is going to be helping to produce this arch. Other things that help with the arch, if you can kind of go over here and look at, this is your cuboid. And when you look on the underside of it, there's a groove here. And that's for a tendon of the fibularis longus. That's not a muscle that we learn. However, if you go back here and take a look at the navicular bone, now on the underside of that, you see that bump? It's got its own little tuberosity. And there's a muscle that has a tendon that comes and attaches to it. It's called the tibialis posterior. And that is one of the main muscles that helps maintain the arch of the foot, that it can kind of pull up there on the underside of that navicular and try to help maintain the arch of the foot. There's other things that maintain the arch of the foot, and we'll be talking about them in class. Sometimes you hear about Liz Frank injuries. Maybe your favorite sports guy has a Liz Frank injury. That tends to be a problem where this medial cuneiform meets this second metatarsal. But that Liz Frank area or joint is in reference to a lot of these cuneiforms and the metatarsals that they meet with. Get that toe right. And so you can have a fracture along there or a dislocation. And then they call that a Liz Frank injury.